So module number 3. Manage Microsoft Defender in Windows Cloud. So this continues from previous lesson. We're going to talk here about Windows Security Center. That's really the single site, I suppose you could call it, that you could go to and access all your security stuff. We're going to talk about the credential guard. Another one of those new security features that rely on our system container. And then for the rest of it, antivirus, that's pretty basic. And the Windows Defender firewall, which is pretty much no different to what we had back in Windows 8. Maybe a little bit different from Windows 7, but yeah, pretty much exactly what we had back in Windows 8. So let's jump in and have a look. So our Windows Security Center covers all aspects of security for the operating system, accounts, applications being used on a specific device. So essentially, it was set up as just a central area where all my security stuff resides. It was always there before, but it was sort of dotted around the control panel, settings menu, etc. So what have we got in our Security Center? We can access our virus and threat protection, our account protection, our firewall and network protection, app and browser control, device security, device performance and health, family options. So we might not, obviously wouldn't use that in a corporate environment. So we might just remove that as an option in the corporate environment, and then protection history from Windows 11. So our protection history lists the recent threats and any recommended actions in Windows 11. So that's just the security setup. Credential guard. So credential guard, generally, they mention there in the student book. Let's just get to that section over there. Okay, I'm just scrolling down to the section of the student book that talks about how Windows Defender Credential Guard works. Now, they mention over there the local security authority prior to Windows 10. I don't like the wording of that because it still works exactly the same in Windows 10 and Windows 11. It's only if you turn on Credential Guard that it'll work differently. So local security guard, instead of prior to Windows 10, I would say the local security guard, the way it works by default in Windows 10 is the LSA. So my local security authority, the LSA stores secrets used by the operating system in its process memory. If we go and implement Defender Credential Guard, then the LSA process in the operating system, we get two different components. We get the LSA SS process in the operating system, and that talks to the isolated LSA process sitting in our virtualization-based security. It is not accessible to the rest of the operating system. And instead of my credentials being stored on the computer the way it normally would, it's now being stored in my virtualization-based security. So it's being stored in this separate isolated container. Only the LSA SS process can talk to the LSA isolated process, and we check its signature before we give it any access. So the idea behind this is it should prevent things like pass, the hash attacks, etc. So we're getting much better protection of our credentials. Remember, it's not on by default. And generally, we probably wouldn't do it on all of our computers in the organization. We'd probably only do it on those administrative workstations. On the workstations that we've implemented our WDAC and device guard, I'd probably be looking at implementing credential guard in those as well. Yes, sir.
Why wouldn't you do credential guard and application control?
Well, you can, but it's going to be a lot more work for you because you've got to. So you've got to go and define for every single computer what applications are going to be allowed. So generally we don't. You can do, depends on what your security requirements are in the organization.
Yeah, okay. More, it's not so much the intensiveness on the machine itself, it's more the configuration that's behind it.
It's a lot of configuration that, and yeah, exactly. And it means if somebody wants to run a particular application on a computer, they simply cannot. So lots of support calls, etc., etc. So generally, we just use these features on what would we call it, highly vulnerable terminals, and terminals that deal with administrative credentials. You want to protect your administrative credentials as much as possible. Standard user credential doesn't necessarily need that protection. Okay, so a couple of things with our Windows Defender Credential Guard. When Windows Defender Credential Guard is enabled, NTLM version 1, MS Chat version 2, Digest, and Cred SSP cannot be used as sign-in credentials. And that is because of the vulnerability of those various protocols. Look, we shouldn't be using NTLM version 1 anymore. Now, that's NT days, 1990s. However, sometimes there's applications that require it, which is why we do. Single sign-on will not work with those protocols when you implement Credential Guard. However, it doesn't mean to say you cannot use those older applications, because what you could do is you could still run them. They would prompt for credentials, and you could use secondary credentials in that case. So don't use the same credentials that the user is using for the other stuff. What you would need to do is set up secondary credentials for that. If you're using the same credentials, you're defeating the security mechanism. Because remembering, if you're using those older vulnerable protocols, it's easier for the user's credentials to be breached. So if you're using secondary credentials, the secondary credentials will be breached, but the main credential won't. What else do they tell us there? Windows Defender Credential Guard, once enabled, will not allow unconstrained Kerberos delegation. So we'll not allow unconstrained Kerberos delegation or DAS encryption. DAS encryption doesn't matter. We shouldn't be using DAS encryption anymore. But what do they mean by unconstrained Kerberos delegation? Well, let's go and have a look at that. So again, let's just zoom up onto our whiteboard. See this? Basically, the way our Kerberos works, it goes along and logs in the morning. And what happens is she gets back from the Kerberos service running on the domain controller a ticket granting ticket. Now, so in other words, if I'm running Credential Guard on here on this computer, that the ticket granting ticket is not going to be stored in the main computer. It's going to be stored in this Hyper-V point. So in this case, she now wants to go and access this file server. This to a web server. It's an application use this web server here. Which is going on to a web server. So what happens is, sends a TGT back here. She gets what's called a security token. That security token has got various certs, etc. in it. So that's what's authenticating her to this backend web server. Now this web server needs to talk to a backend SQL server. So there's two things here. The web server, when accessing the SQL server, needs to be authenticated. So it's going to pass through its web credentials. Security token from the web server. Well, maybe my SQL server has been designed such that we want to know who the user is because we've maybe got some user permissions, or maybe we're doing some sort of auditing and we want to know exactly who it is who's accessing the content. But it doesn't help when all I'm using is the web service security token because it's not telling me anything about the user who's accessing the content. So in that case, what we do, we use something called Kerberos delegation, which means this security token here can be used by the web server on behalf of the user to authenticate to the SQL server, and we don't worry about making use of the web service credentials. So essentially, my web server is authenticating on behalf of the user. When we talk about unconstrained Kerberos delegation, it means this web server could then go and take this user security token and go and access something else. And of course, that's very risky, because it means if somebody was able to capture that token and you're allowing unconstrained delegation, then they could use it to authenticate to anything within the organization. So we never want unconstrained delegation anyway. We shouldn't be using unconstrained delegation. We should only ever be using constrained delegation. But that's what they mean there by unconstrained delegation. So if I've got credential guard on here, we cannot use unconstrained delegation, which is a good thing because we shouldn't be using it anyway. It should always be constrained. Okay, adjust this back into classroom view. Share. So that is our credential guard. Pretty cool feature. Something that you can consider, certainly for your administrative workstations. Now, my Windows antivirus, honestly, it's like any other antivirus. You guys are familiar with antiviruses. So what does it do? Protects your computer from spyware, malware, viruses. It's Hyper-V aware. Do quick full custom scans, etc., etc. So yeah, no different to any one of the top quality antivirus products out there. My Windows Defender firewall. Well, that's my firewall in Windows. Again, we've had that for a while. They introduced the firewall initially in XP. Firewall in XP, though, only allowed you to control incoming traffic. And then in Vista, when they redesigned the firewall, you could control both incoming and outgoing traffic. Vista Windows 7, when we logged onto a network, we had to choose whether it was a private or a public network. And if it was a private network, as we see over here, then we could have certain rules defined for the private network, as opposed to our public network. If we went onto a public network, we could have different rules for a public network, obviously more restrictive if we're on a public network than on a private network. So private network would be a work network or your home network, public network, the airport lounge, the coffee shop, etc. Then with Windows 8, they introduced the domain network. So the computer is aware of when it is connected to the domain. And so you can get a separate domain profile, private profile, and public network profile. So in other words, I can have separate rules when I'm on my domain, as opposed to my private network, as opposed to my public network. So those are my various profiles. And that's no different to Windows 10. Windows 10, same as Windows 8. It's got those three profiles. What else? This is basically showing over here just the normal screen or in the settings menu for your firewall and network protection. So you can see they're all turned on, which is good. They should be turned on. We can also, through here, allow a NAP through a firewall. We can do our network and this other stuff. But if I want to go and configure anything seriously on it, I want to go through to the advanced firewall settings. Now, in our student book, they don't show us that, but I'll jump on to sorry, on the slides they don't show us it, in the student book they do. Just before we go on there, notice if you allow an app through a firewall. So it's always safer to add a program to the list of allowed programs in your firewall rather than going and opening up a port. For example, if I wanted to allow port 80 traffic into my firewall, I could do that based on an application. That way, that application will allow the port to be opened up rather than say, well, let's open up port 80 and allow any traffic, whether it's web traffic or not. Because as soon as you open up a port, you're opening up a big black hole. So it's more secure to allow the application through rather than opening up the port. Problem is sometimes we have to open up ports because it does not identify the application properly, as I have seen in the past. Okay, just on this over here. So it knows when you're on a domain network. You've got to choose whether it's private or public. So how does it know whether it's a private or public network? Once you have chosen whether it's a private or public, it actually records that information in your registry. So it's what we call network location awareness. Next time you're on that same network, you're not asked that question anymore it automatically just puts you onto the private network or the public network, whatever it is that you chose. So the way it does this is it records information about that network, such as the MAC address of your default gateway, IP address of your default gateway, IP address range in the network. So when you happen to be on that same network and says, oh, I've seen that MAC address before, the default gateway IP address is the same, range of addresses are all the same on this, you must be on your home network. So it's able to identify the actual network. And it's pretty accurate because MAC addresses shouldn't change. So it gives us an accurate location awareness. However, to do any real configuration, I want to go through to my firewall with advanced security. So advanced security snap-in. What did they mention over here? Windows Defender firewall with advanced security, network aware app, and having a defined flexibility on internal network. Okay, so we spoke about the network awareness. Spoke about the profiles, and we can configure the various rules such as inbound rules, outbound rules, connection security rules. Let us go and have a look at that one. Okay, so that's what my advanced firewall looks like. So what are they telling us over here? You can notice I've got inbound rules, I've got outbound rules. So these are my rules I can create. You can see here, here's my various profiles. Firewalls are on. Inbound connections that don't match rule are blocked. Outbound connections that do match rule are allowed. So in other words, the way my firewall works by default, unless I've got a rule that allows traffic into the computer, nothing will be allowed in. Only if I've got a rule will something be allowed in. As opposed to everything will be allowed out of the computer unless I've got a rule specifically preventing it. So that's the way it works by default. It's sort of the way my XP firewall works because XP didn't have outbound connection rules. In a high security environment, what I do is I change that and I actually make outbound connections. I block all outbound connections unless it matches a rule. So for things like your administrative workstations, you would typically go ahead and do that. You would specify a set of rules that would allow traffic to go out of that computer and deny everything else. Again, from a security perspective. For a user's computer, you generally wouldn't do it. It would cause you more headaches than anything else. Okay. But yeah, for my administrative workstations, I would certainly go ahead and do that. Now we can have rules defined, inbound rules, outbound rules for each profile independently. I could have a rule for both private or domain. I could have a rule for all three, etc. Just depends on how you want to configure it. So with regard to our rules, there are 4 different types of inbound and outbound rules. There are program rules, as we mentioned, allowing a program in. Port rule, where we open up a port. Predefined rule. So, for example, there's predefined rules such as I want to allow a remote desktop onto my computer. So that's just a predefined rule. Click on that. It'll set up everything required to allow a remote desktop into that computer. Other than that, if none of those first 3 help, there are custom rules. So you can go and create your own custom rule. Now you'll notice over here, they've got something called connection security rules. So what is a connection security rule? Well, a connection security rule is an IPsec rule. What has IPsec got to do with our firewall? Well, the IPsec rules or connection security rules specify that we want authentication between this computer and another computer, and or we want encryption between the two of them. The firewall says we allow the communication in or out. So it works together with the firewall. We can have a highly secure computer, highly secure server that I want to set up so that it can only talk to another server, but they must authenticate before they talk to each other. And I want the encryption between them encrypted. And then when that communication arrives, I've still got my firewall rules that ensure I only allow the correct communication in and block anything else. So they sort of work hand in hand, and we configure them in the same section. So with our connection security rules, again, we've got a number of rule types to choose from. Isolation rules. So an isolation rule isolates computers by restricting connections based on authentication criteria. So generally in isolation rule, we can say, well, you must be a domain member in order to talk to this computer. If you're not a domain member, if it's a work group computer, it wouldn't be able to communicate. So again, we're using our Kerberos authentication there, essentially for our authentication in an isolation rule. But then I might also want some authentication exemption rules. My domain controllers, things like my certificate servers, etc. Well, generally they wouldn't necessarily need to be, or wouldn't have those requiring to be authenticated. So we've got some authentication exemption rules for those particular services. A server to server rule. So where my isolation rule, I'm isolating it based on the entire domain. Server to server is even more specific. I'm specifying a rule just for two servers to communicate with each other, for example. So protecting connections between specific computers. Tunnel rules. So in IPsec, we can also use IPsec to create a tunnel. Essentially, it's using IPsec as a VPN. We don't generally use it as a VPN anymore, but yeah, we can go and create our tunnel rules. So again, securing communications traveling between two computers by using tunnel mode in IPsec instead of transport mode. Generally, we use transport mode on-prem, and I would use tunnel mode if I'm going from the servers may be communicating with another server on another site going over the internet. But I could use a tunnel rule internally as well, just depending on how I want to protect that traffic. And then, okay, again, if none of those suit you, then you can also go and create your own custom rules. So that is our connection security. What is this monitoring tab over here? So when I go and create a connection security rule, we mentioned yesterday when we were talking about VPNs, we spoke about that IKE protocol, Internet Key Exchange. So with the original IPsec, it was called ISAC-MP, Internet Security Association Key Management Protocol, which was then became known in short as Internet Key Exchange. And we don't really talk about ISAC-MP. We always talk about it as IKE today, but the underlying protocol is still the ISAC-MP. So what is ISAC-MP and IKE? Well, basically, when two devices have been configured with IPsec and we need to set up secure communications between them, we need to go through, firstly, the authentication of those two computers. So that is my first security association that we set up, is the authentication. We have now set up a secure channel from where we negotiate the encryption that we're going to be using. So it can be that encryption is, we define the various encryption protocols accepted on this server. This server's got some others defined, and we're looking for the most secure match. We don't find a match, we can't set up a secure connection. But we're going to go from the most secure down to the least secure listed in that configuration to try and set up the most secure possible connection between the two. That is my second security association. So the monitoring, we can click on the monitoring tab over here and go and view those two security associations. Okay, but that's part of the ISAC-MP protocol or IKE protocol. Okay, folks, there was a very big section. The very last lesson here, the new one, which just talks about the CASP, the Cloud Access Security Broker in Windows. So what is CASP? Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps is a versatile cloud access security broker solution with advanced features for extensive visibility and control, along with sophisticated analytics to detect and navigate cybersecurity threats. CASBs provide extra safeguards for cloud services by enforcing enterprise security policies, brokering access, and monitoring user activities. So in other words, what a CASB is instead of your user just going into your Azure and accessing stuff over there, they go via a cloud access security broker, where you can go and define various policies, etc. Okay. So they mentioned that it offers a broad range of capabilities to safeguard your environment, such as visibility, data security, threat protection, compliance. Prerequisites. So every user protected by Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps must have a license. You need to be a global administrator or security administrator in Azure Active Directory or Office 365. And to run the Defender for Cloud Apps portal, use Edge, Chrome, and whatever. Now, again, it's really just an intro into this feature in Microsoft. So we're not going to be doing a lab and that on it. But this section of your student book here just goes through the overall steps in order to implement your Microsoft Defender for Cloud apps in your 365 Defender portal. So you set your incident visibility protection governance sections, choose what sensitive information needs to be protected with your DLP policies, the various control cloud apps, set up your cloud discovery, etc., etc. So go through that in a bit of detail through your student books. If you're interested in that, have a read through that. For our labs, we've got 2 labs here. Here's our WIP, configure and deploy Windows information protection policies by using Intune. So then we're going to play around with our WIP stuff. And then configuring disk encryption using Intune. Hopefully they've fixed that lab, because the last time I did it, it didn't work. Hopefully they've fixed things up that they can work okay. So jump into your labs. It's going on for 11:30 now. We probably won't finish those labs by lunch, but what we might do is run on labs through to lunchtime. Then when we come back from lunch, I'll do the next theory section, and that way you've just got labs left to do. As soon as you've finished your lab, you're free to go. That way we don't hold up anybody who's quick with their labs. But you're through the most complicated section of the course now. How did you all find that module? Heavy going? It was good? Interesting? Good. Yeah, excellent. How'd the guys in the Zoom call go?
Good.
Good thing.
Not the digest, but yep, good.
It is a lot, isn't it, John? Yeah.
The first lab is configuring endpoint security using Intune.
Because they're recording something else in the lab there.
Configuring endpoint security using Intune. The second one is named the same. This condition using Intune.
Okay, well, those must be the 2. I'm not sure why it's gone and given a different name there in the lab. But it's possible because they revised the lab, so it's possible they changed something. No, you're right. It's a completely different lab. Oh, well, that's what they've done. They've removed this other lab. That is a great pity. Why have they done that? Okay. Yeah. They've obviously taken out the Windows Information Protection Lab. That's a great pity, though. That's a good lab to do. I don't know what Microsoft is doing. Yeah, so do that one and then do the next one. It'll actually go through quite quickly because the WIP lab took a bit longer to do.
Hey, David, this course is MD 1 or 2, isn't it?
This is MD 102, yes. This is the new
Yeah.
course, yes.
And 101, it used to be called 101 before?
That is correct, yes. MD 101, yes.
Okay.
the guys in the Zoom call, I've just sent that link to that document that you can see up there. That's there were some questions yesterday around troubleshooting 365 installs. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of this particular article, there's a whole lot of stuff there around troubleshooting. So how you can go about troubleshooting, where you can go and get logging information, etc. So hopefully that can help with some of you had some questions around that. So for the guys in the class, if you are interested in that article, it's just over here under learnmicrosoft.com. So just do a search for adding Microsoft 365 apps to Windows 10, 11 devices with Intune.
David, I have a question.
Yes, John.
Just very general. Once we finish end of day tomorrow, we lose access to these labs, correct?
No, John, you will have access to this lab. So your free tenancy was for 30 days from the 27th of July. So you'll have access to that till the 27th of August. As long as
Okay, all right.
as long as you remember your login to the DDS Learn on Demand, you got access to that for the next 3-4 weeks.
No worries. And second question is, not for right now, but at some point in the future, doing the exam and stuff, you guys are a certified testing center, correct?
Not anymore. We
No.
used to be. There's fewer and fewer testing centers now. Just became so expensive to actually run testing centers, and a lot of the well, they introduced test from home capability as well. So the last time I did a test at a testing center, that was down in Parramatta somewhere.
Okay.
I can't remember the name of the place, but if you go through to register for your exam, it'll pop up with a list of the testing centers. Alternatively, you can do the exam at home.
Okay. All right. No worries. Good enough.
All good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I can hear you. Yep, just jumping on and having a look at your lab. Okay, I'm just going to take control here a sec and just have a look. I'm going to just try and do a reset of the internet gateway, see if that gets us back. Right, let's go and have a look at another one. It's on there. It's going to look at. Sorry, it's coming back now. Okay, so it looks like it's back on again. All good. You're welcome. Hop up to the second lab. So your BitLocker configuration. Stop at that point. I see they have corrected the BitLocker lab. So we can get it to work. You want to go to that new site. You obviously found that. Guys, on the BitLocker, if it doesn't look correct when you get to step 9 or step 10, just have a look at the note they've got there. You've actually got to go to a different, you've got to go to the older version of Intune. So they give you a link to the older version of Intune. So they haven't actually updated the configuration settings. This is actually the older way we used to do it.
David, I'm trying to enable BitLocker settings and device is taking forever to sync.
So say again here.
So I'm enabling BitLocker settings
Yeah.
and the device sync is just forever. Like device is not able to sync.
It's not able to sync. So you configured your BitLocker and you're waiting for the
Yes.
device for it to pop up. It can take a little while though.
Okay. It says it's in progress. It's been for a while.
Yeah, it can take a little while.
Okay, that should be okay.
So sometimes it's taking too long. Just go out of it and go back and retry the sync.
Okay, cool. Yep. Oh, now it says it is successful. Like I just opened it up again and it's successful.
Okay, good.
Yeah, thank you. David, once the sync was completed or successful, the next step is select the encryption needed notification. But I didn't have any notification, so I'm syncing again.
Okay, let me just download yours and have a look.
Yeah.
It can take a little bit of time before it actually pops up.
Yep, I'm syncing it again in order to get that encryption needed notification.
Okay, notice you've got 2 messages over here down the bottom. Just click on that 2. Let's see what that tells us.
Okay, yeah. Your process settings upload
No,
access
okay,
your
so it's not there. That's
yeah.
good. Yeah, you're doing the encryption one as well, yeah.
David, if I go back and resync it, I think it will sync, but I'm not getting that encryption needed notification somehow.
Let me just jump onto yours. I'll go and check your settings there. Just give me a sec.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to take control and have a look now.
Yep.
After labs, we are doing lunch, aren't we?
Yeah, we're going to break for lunch now.
Sure.
If you're done, you can go and have your lunch already.
location request I sent through yesterday, it actually blocked the attempts to track it into locations where it's the bulk. Yeah, I put it on yesterday. It just says one time twice, then when I went into the notifications, so.
It's in, yeah, at the moment it doesn't look like it's synced up. Last was 6:44, which is about 20 odd minutes ago. I'm not sure why it's not syncing now. It's just battling to talk to Intune. These things happen with Intune, so we'll just give it a bit of time to settle.
Oh, that's fine.
That's probably why you haven't seen it pop up yet. I don't think it's actually synced it through. I actually did try to do a force sync from your server one, you might have noticed. But that doesn't seem to have worked either. So I logged off and logged back on. That would have updated that if the force sync had worked. So we're going to break for lunch now anyway, so let's just leave it running. Otherwise, what we can do is just reboot our workstation one.
Okay.
Sometimes it can also help.
Yep. No, that's fine, David.
Your policy looks fine. It looks, it looks like it's targeted at that device. It just hasn't yet updated it.
Yep, that's fine. Let's give it a time. Give some time. Yeah.
All right, folks. How are we all doing? How's everybody else doing at the moment? Looks like most people are pretty much done. So Roses, you done? Yeah. Sandeep is done. The others are mostly done. John's way ahead. Okay. What we're going to do, Tej is way ahead. What we're going to do is break for lunch now. 45 minutes for lunch. When we come back from lunch, we will do the next theory section. So we're going to look at our deployments, deploying using on-premises based tools. And after that, we just got labs to do. The labs are not difficult this afternoon. They just take a long time because we're installing operating systems. There's lots of hanging around and waiting, but it's not difficult. But go off and enjoy your lunch break. I will see everyone back in 45 minutes. So guys, that means 5 to 1. We'll start the next theory section. Okay.